The cloying scent of lilies and champagne hung in the air, a sweet, suffocating perfume that clung to the velvet drapes and gilded molding of the Astor Grand Ballroom. Outside, the New York City skyline glittered, a galaxy of ambition laid out for the guests of the annual Sterling Dynamics Charity Gala. Inside, however, the stars were the predators, their jewelry gleaming like constellations of captured light under the massive crystal chandeliers. Gloria Hayes felt the weight of their gazes, 1,000 tiny pinpricks against her skin. She smoothed the front of her borrowed dress, a simple but elegant navy column that felt like a costume. A very expensive, very tight costume. She had spent the last of her savings on the ticket, a desperate gamble that made her stomach churn with a mixture of terror and resolve. For weeks, she had studied the guest list, memorized the faces of board members, and practiced a polite, unassuming smile in her bathroom mirror. Tonight, she was not Gloria Hayes, night shift janitor. She was Gloria Hayes, an aspiring nonprofit consultant, a ghost in their machine, present under a pretense so thin she feared it would tear with a single probing question. A string quartet played Vivaldi in a corner, their music a pleasant, forgettable soundtrack to the low hum of power brokering. Men in bespoke tuxedos laughed with their heads thrown back, their voices booming with the easy confidence of those who owned the world. Women with impossibly smooth faces held champagne flutes with practiced grace, their eyes scanning the room, assessing, calculating. Gloria nursed a glass of sparkling water, her hands steady, her posture perfect. She had learned long ago that stillness was a form of armor. Suddenly, the music stopped. The hum of conversation faltered. A single spotlight cut through the ballroom's ambient glow, finding Richard Sterling as he stepped onto the small stage. He was exactly as he appeared in the pages of Forbes and Fortune Tall, impeccably tailored, with a predator's smile that never quite reached his cold blue eyes. Friends, colleagues, esteemed guests, his voice, amplified by the microphone, filled the cavernous room. Thank you all for coming tonight to support such a worthy cause. Your generosity is a testament to the character of our city, to the spirit of giving back. The room erupted in polite, self-congratulatory applause. Gloria's hands remained at her sides. Speaking of giving back, Sterling continued, his smile widening. I want to take a moment to honor someone truly special tonight. Someone who represents the bedrock of our society, the unsung heroes who make all of this. He gestured grandly at the opulent room possible. The working class. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. This was not on the program. Sterling's gaze swept the room, and, for a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, his eyes locked with Gloria's. He knew. Somehow, he knew. We have a guest with us tonight, he said, his voice dripping with condescending warmth. Who embodies that spirit of hard work more than anyone else here? A woman who, until recently, was one of my most dedicated employees. A true salt-of-the-earth individual. Gloria Hayes. Would you please join me on stage? The spotlight swung away from Sterling and landed squarely on Gloria. The heat was instantaneous, a physical blow. The murmurs in the room grew louder, laced with curiosity and derision. Every head turned. She was pinned, exposed, a specimen under a microscope. Her mind went blank, a white wall of panic rising. But then, another image broke through, sharp and cold as ice. A different room, a cramped, dusty factory office 30 years ago, the air thick with the smell of machine oil and defeat. Her father, a proud, strong man with calloused hands, stood before another Sterling Richards' father, a man with the same cold eyes. Just a small loan. Arthur. Her father was pleading, his voice tight with shame. To keep the line running. We were partners. Arthur Sterling had laughed. A short, barking sound. Partners. We had an arrangement. Henry. And you failed to hold up your end. Now, if you want my help, you'll show me just how much you want it. Get on your knees. Henry. Beg for it. Maybe then I'll consider it. Gloria felt the memory like a shard of glass in her heart. She saw her father's shoulders slump, the light go out of his eyes, the slow, soul-crushing descent to the dirty linoleum floor. That was the day her family broke, the day the shame began. Come now, Gloria, don't be shy. Richard Sterling's voice jolted her back to the present. He was beckoning her, his smile a mask of polite encouragement that barely concealed the cruel glint in his eyes. The walk to the stage was the longest of her life. The plush carpet seemed to suck at her heels. Each step, a monumental effort. The whispers followed her, snatches of conversation piercing the haze. Isn't that one of the cleaners? What is he doing? This is mortifying. She reached the stage and stood before him, her back ramrod straight, her expression a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. Isn't she wonderful? Sterling said, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. It felt like a brand. Gloria here has spent the last decade keeping our headquarters spotless. A truly thankless job. So tonight, I'd like to thank her. In fact, I'd like to make a special donation in her honor. He paused for effect, letting the tension build. But first, a small demonstration of the kind of dedication that built this company. Gloria, we have a little spill right here. He pointed to a small, imaginary spot on the pristine stage floor. Would you mind showing our guests how you'd take care of that? Just get down and show us the proper technique. The demand hung in the air, a perfect, crystalline echo of the past. The room fell into a dead, shocked silence. This wasn't just a humiliation. It was a ritual, a legacy of cruelty passed from father to son. He wasn't just mocking a janitor. He was reenacting the destruction of her family, and he wanted her to participate in it. Gloria's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. But on the outside, she was utterly still. She looked at Richard Sterling, at the smug certainty on his face, at the predatory gleam of the jewelry on the women in the front row, at the sea of powerful faces watching her, waiting for her to break. She did not break. She did not cry. She did not speak. She simply held his gaze, in the depths of her eyes. A cold, dark fire ignited, a rage so profound, so ancient. It burned away the fear and the shame, leaving behind a core of pure, unyielding steel. She was no longer just a janitor. She was the daughter of Henry Hayes. She was a witness. And, in that silent, suffocating moment, she became a promise. She turned, without a word, and walked off the stage. Her steps were not hurried. They were measured, deliberate, each one a silent vow. The whispers and stunned silence followed her as she walked through the ballroom, past the marble columns and the gawking guests, and out into the cool night air. The sound of the heavy doors closing behind her was the sound of a battle line being drawn. He thought he had unmade her. He had no idea he had just created his own ruin. The Human Resources Department on the 32nd floor of Sterling Dynamics was a temple of sterile modernism. Glass walls, brushed steel accents, and abstract art in muted tones created an atmosphere of detached, clinical efficiency. Gloria's sensible shoes made no sound on the polished concrete floor as she approached the reception desk. She had traded the borrowed gala dress for her best blouse and a neatly pressed pair of slacks. In her hand, she clutched a formal complaint form, every line filled out in precise block lettering. The receptionist, a young woman whose expression suggested she was perpetually unimpressed, barely looked up. "May I help you?" "I have an appointment with Karen Whitmore," Gloria said, her voice even. She'd learned from a sympathetic security guard that lying about an appointment was the only way to get past the gatekeepers. The lie worked. A few moments later, she was being ushered into an office that felt more like a minimalist art gallery than a workspace. Karen Whitmore sat behind a vast white desk, a single orchid, her only decoration. She was a woman who seemed assembled from sharp angles and expensive fabrics, her smile as thin and brittle as a wafer of ice. "Ms. Hayes," Karen began, her tone a masterclass in professional indifference. "Thank you for coming in. I understand you have a concern you'd like to discuss." Gloria placed the complaint form on the desk. The paper felt ridiculously small in the vast white space between them. "Last night, at the company's charity gala, Richard Sterling publicly harassed and humiliated me in front of hundreds of guests. His actions were discriminatory and created a hostile environment. It's all detailed in the report." Karen picked up the form, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the paper as she scanned it. Her face was a placid mask. "I see. These are very serious allegations. Gloria, you understand that, don't you?" "They are not allegations. They are facts. There were hundreds of witnesses." "Of course," Karen said, her smile not wavering. "And we take all reports from our employees very seriously. Sterling Dynamics is committed to a safe and respectful workplace for everyone." She spoke the corporate-approved words, as if reading them from an invisible teleprompter. She slid the form into a pristine white folder. "We will launch a full and thorough investigation. You'll be contacted by our team in due course." The meeting was over. Gloria was dismissed with the same cool efficiency as a solved equation. She left the office with a knot of unease in her stomach. The entire exchange had felt rehearsed, a pantomime of due process designed to contain and neutralize, not to solve. 2 days later, having heard nothing, Gloria returned. This time, the receptionist blocked her path. "Ms. Whitmore is in meetings all day. I just need to check on the status of my complaint." The receptionist typed for a moment, her brow furrowed in feigned concentration. "I'm sorry. I don't see any active complaint filed under your name." "That's impossible," Gloria said, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself. "I was here on Monday. I handed the form directly to Ms. Whitmore." A familiar, perfectly modulated voice cut in. "Gloria, a word, please." Karen Whitmore stood by her office door, beckoning Gloria into a small, windowless conference room. The moment the door clicked shut, Karen's professional mask dissolved, revealing a face of cold, hard authority. "Let me be perfectly clear," she said, her voice low and sharp. "Your complaint was noted, and it has been resolved." "Resolved how no one has spoken to me. No one has contacted any of the witnesses." Karen stepped closer, her expensive perfume suddenly cloying in the small space. "Gloria, we value your long service. You have a stable job here, a pension, benefits. It would be a shame for a simple misunderstanding to disrupt such a long-term, stable arrangement. I'm sure you understand the wisdom in letting this go." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Gloria insisted, her hands clenching at her sides. "He inherited his father's cruelty. He wanted to make me crawl, just like his father did to mine." The mention of her father seemed to catch Karen off guard for a fraction of a second before her composure returned. Colder than before. "You are dangerously close to making baseless, slanderous accusations. Drop it. That is not a suggestion. It is a final warning." Karen's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and a small, cruel smile touched her lips. Oh, and one more thing. Due to company-wide restructuring and performance reviews, your hours are being reduced, effective immediately. You'll find your new, significantly lighter. Schedule in your employee portal. The message was brutally clear. They had not only buried her complaint, they were punishing her for daring to file it. They were squeezing her, turning the financial screws, expecting her to break. That evening, Gloria sat in her small, immaculate apartment, staring at a stack of bills on her kitchen table. Half her income was gone. The rent, the utilities, the money she sent to her son in college. It was an impossible equation now. Despair, cold and heavy, settled in her chest. They had her trapped. She had played by their rules, and they had simply changed the game. Her gaze fell on her laptop, a clunky old model her son had left behind. She thought of the gala, of the hundreds of phones that had been recording her humiliation. The evidence was out there, on social media, in the digital ether. But it was just a moment of viral outrage, forgotten as quickly as the next scandal. It wasn't proof of the system, of the rot that went all the way down. As she logged onto her employee portal to see the damage to her schedule, a small pop-up message appeared. It was from the internal messaging system, a feature she never used. The sender was listed only as ET intern. The message was brief. They're shredding documents in sub-level 2. Financials. They think no one sees. I saved something for you. Check the loose panel behind the fire extinguisher. 44th floor, East Corridor. Be careful. Gloria stared at the message, her heart beginning to pound a hard, hopeful rhythm. Who was ET intern? Why were they helping her? It didn't matter. The despair that had been suffocating her moments before was burned away by a surge of adrenaline. They thought they had silenced her. They thought they had won. But they had forgotten the first rule of power: the people you render invisible see everything. The 44th floor was executive territory, a hushed world of thick carpets and original art. Gloria's cleaning cart, its squeaky wheel a familiar companion in the lonely late hours, felt like an invading tank in the hallowed silence. Her new, reduced schedule meant she was here during the day's end, when a skeleton crew of ambitious associates still toiled under pools of lamplight. She kept her head down, her movements practiced and efficient, a ghost in gray overalls. She found the fire extinguisher exactly where the message had said. Her hands, slick with nervous sweat, fumbled with the edge of the wall panel behind it. It came loose with a soft click. Tucked inside the dark recess was a single, black USB drive. She slipped it into her pocket, the small rectangle of plastic feeling as heavy and dangerous as a loaded gun. Back in the safety of her apartment, the old laptop hummed to life. Gloria inserted the drive. Her hands trembled as she clicked open the single folder. It contained dozens of files, most of them password protected, their names a meaningless jumble of letters and numbers. But one file was a video, and one was an unlocked spreadsheet. She clicked on the video first. The ballroom appeared on her screen, the quality sharp and clear. It was filmed from the side of the stage, a perfect, damning angle. She watched herself walk into the spotlight. She heard Sterling's condescending voice. She saw the cruel smirk on his face as he made his demand. She forced herself to watch the whole thing. The silence, her defiant walk off the stage. The video ended, but the rage it reignited was fresh and raw. Next, she opened the spreadsheet. It was a ledger of some kind, columns of dates, account numbers, and transaction amounts. The numbers were staggering. Millions of dollars moving between Sterling Dynamics and a list of entities with names like Apex Global Ventures and Orion Holdings, LLC. She didn't understand what it all meant, but she knew it wasn't right. This was the why. The humiliation was the symptom. This was the disease. Her mind raced back to whispers she'd overheard in the break room years ago. A cautionary tale about an accountant who had gotten too close to the truth. Marcus Green. They had ruined him, fired him, sued him, blacklisted him from the industry. They had made an example of him. A quick search on her phone yielded a grainy photo and an address in a run-down part of Queens. It was a long shot. He had every reason to slam the door in her face, but he was the only one who might understand the numbers on her screen. The next morning, she stood outside a peeling door in a walk-up apartment building that smelled of damp and decay. She knocked. After a long moment, the door opened a crack, held by a security chain. A man with tired eyes, a graying beard, and a face etched with the memory of defeat peered out. Marcus Green. "Who's asking?" His voice was rough, suspicious. "My name is Gloria Hayes. I worked at Sterling Dynamics." She held up the USB drive. "I think you need to see this." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze sharp and intelligent. Finally, the chain slid back. "You've got 5 minutes." His apartment was a chaotic fortress of information. Books on financial law were stacked to the ceiling. Multiple computer monitors glowed with scrolling stock tickers and lines of code. An evidence board covered one wall, a spiderweb of names and connecting lines of red string, all centered on a single, smirking photograph of Richard Sterling. He took the drive without a word and plugged it into his system. As he opened the spreadsheet, his weary expression sharpened into one of intense, focused fury. "My God," he whispered, his fingers flying across the keyboard, cross-referencing the data with files of his own. "This is it. This is the new network. After I was fired, they had to change everything. This is how they've been doing it." "Doing what?" Gloria asked. He turned to her, his eyes burning with an intensity she hadn't seen before. "Money laundering, bribes to regulators, funneling money from the employee pension fund into offshore accounts. He's not just a corporate bully, Ms. Hayes. He's a thief on a colossal scale. But this," he pointed to a specific series of transactions. "This is something else. This is personal." He enlarged a section of the spreadsheet. The transactions were from 30 years ago, funneling money out of a small manufacturing company, Hayes Innovative Parts. He read aloud. Gloria's breath caught in her throat. "That was my father's company." Marcus's face softened with a grim understanding. "According to these records, Arthur Sterling didn't just betray your father. He systematically bankrupted him, siphoning funds through a shell corporation, while positioning himself to buy the assets for pennies on the dollar after the company collapsed. What Richard did to you at that gala, it wasn't random. It was a victory lap, a celebration of a decades-old crime." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Her father hadn't just failed. He had been destroyed. His suspicious death a year later, ruled an accidental fall at a construction site, suddenly seemed far less accidental. The shame she had carried for years was not hers. It was a carefully crafted lie. "Can we prove it?" she asked, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "The encrypted files on this drive are the key," Marcus said, his old fighting spirit reigniting. "If I can break the encryption, we'll have the whole trail, from your father's company to the pension fund. But they'll fight back. They'll do to you what they did to me. They'll try to destroy you." Gloria looked at the evidence board, at the web of corruption that had stolen her family's legacy and her own dignity. She thought of the young intern, E.T., who had risked his job to give her this chance. She thought of her father's broken spirit. "They already tried," she said, her voice devoid of fear. "Now, it's our turn." The first blow landed the next evening. Gloria returned from a fruitless day of job searching to find her apartment door hanging slightly ajar. Her heart seized. She pushed it open to a scene of calculated violation. It wasn't a robbery. Her old television and laptop were still there. This was a message. Cushions were slashed. A bag of flour had been emptied over her worn but comfortable sofa. But the cruelest cut was on the kitchen table. A single, framed photograph lay in the center of the table. The glass shattered. It was the only picture she had left of her father. A smiling young man in a workshop, standing next to his business partner, a much younger Arthur Sterling. A thick, red line had been drawn across her father's throat. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We know you have it. You don't want to end up like your father." A cold dread washed over her, followed immediately by a white-hot wave of fury. They were invoking his memory to threaten her, twisting the knife they had plunged into her family 30 years ago. She sank into a kitchen chair, the shards of glass crunching under its leg, and took a steadying breath. Fear was a luxury she could no longer afford. She called Marcus. "They were here. They know. Get out of there. Now." His voice was urgent. "They've bugged my apartment before. They're probably listening to you right now. Don't go to a hotel. Don't use your credit cards. Go to the public library on 42nd Street. Use one of their computers. Log into a secure email account I'm sending you now. We'll communicate through that." Gloria moved quickly. She grabbed a spare set of clothes, her father's ruined photograph, and the precious USB drive, which she had hidden inside the lining of her winter coat. She walked out of her defiled home without looking back, melting into the anonymity of the city streets. In the hushed, cavernous reading room of the library, surrounded by strangers, she felt a strange sense of safety. She followed Marcus's instructions, her fingers flying across the public keyboard. "Gloria, they vandalized my home, threatened me, mentioned my father." "Marcus, I'm not surprised. I've been working on the encryption. It's military grade. But I'm making progress. What they're hiding is massive. It's not just fraud. I found references to environmental settlements and worksite incidents. People have died. Gloria, 3 workers at an overseas factory last year. The company paid millions to make the official reports disappear." The weight of it was staggering. This went beyond theft. This was blood money. "Gloria, we have to get this out. We need more help." "Marcus, there's the intern, E.T. Do you know who he is?" Gloria thought for a moment. She'd seen a young, nervous-looking intern a few times, always hurrying, always looking overwhelmed. Eric Thompson. She'd seen his name on a discarded memo once. "Gloria, Eric Thompson. I think that's him." "Marcus, find him." Cautiously. "He's our only inside source. I'm going to focus on cracking the rest of these files. We need the full picture before we make our move. Stay off the grid. Be careful who you trust." The next day, Gloria waited in a coffee shop across from the Sterling Dynamics Tower, a place frequented by low-level employees on their lunch breaks. She watched the river of people flowing in and out of the building's grand entrance. Just before 1 o'clock, she saw him, Eric Thompson, looking even more stressed than usual, hurrying out with a sandwich in a paper bag. She intercepted him on the corner. "Eric." He jumped, his eyes wide with fear. He recognized her immediately. I can't talk to you. They're watching everyone." "They already know about me," Gloria said, her voice low and calm. "They've been to my apartment. I know the risk you took, and I am grateful. But we're not done." "I gave you the drive," he stammered. "That's all I can do. I have student loans, a family." "Richard Sterling is covering up the deaths of his workers," Gloria said. Cutting through his panic, He stole my father's company and legacy. What he did to me was just a symptom of a sickness that runs to the core of that building. You know it. That's why you helped me. Now, I need you to help me again." Eric looked back at the gleaming tower, a monument to the power that terrified him. "What do you want?" he whispered. "Information. We need to know their next move. What are they saying in the executive meetings? What are they trying to hide now?" He hesitated, a war playing out on his young face. Fear versus conscience. Finally, he gave a short, jerky nod. "There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow to discuss the PR situation. I can try to get the agenda. I'll leave it in the same place. But after this, I'm done. I can't lose my job." "Thank you, Eric," Gloria said. "You're doing the right thing." As he hurried away, Gloria felt a flicker of hope. They were no longer just two people against an empire. They were three: a disgraced accountant, a terrified intern, and an invisible janitor. It wasn't an army, but it was a start, and they had the one weapon Sterling couldn't buy or bully the truth. The anonymous email from Marcus arrived at 3:17 a.m. Gloria, bleary-eyed in a 24-hour diner where she'd been nursing the same cup of coffee for hours, opened it on the library laptop she'd forgotten to return. "Marcus, I broke the final encryption layer. It's worse than we thought." Attached was a single, password-protected document. She typed in the password he'd provided Henry, and the file opened. It was a mosaic of pure evil, meticulously documented. There were the final, damning records of how Sterling's father had systematically bled Hayes' innovative parts dry. But there was more. So much more. There were internal reports detailing the cover-up of the 3 factory deaths, complete with falsified safety inspections signed a week after the incident. There were payoffs to environmental regulators to ignore illegal dumping of toxic waste near residential communities. There were transcripts of secretly recorded conversations where Richard Sterling joked about exploiting undocumented labor. And then there was the video folder. Not just the clip from the gala, but security footage from inside the Sterling building. Footage of Sterling verbally abusing assistants. Footage of another executive making unwanted advances on a young intern. Footage of Karen Whitmore ordering a security guard to destroy an employee's complaint file. It was an encyclopedia of corruption. An empire built on a foundation of criminality, held together by fear and intimidation. "Gloria, we have everything. What's our move?" "Marcus, we can't just dump it all. They'll bury it in lawsuits and dismiss it as a hacker's smear campaign. We need a trusted outlet, one with the resources to verify everything and the courage to publish. I know a journalist, Vanessa Cruz. She's fearless. She brought down a corrupt senator last year. If anyone can do this, it's her." He sent a contact number. Gloria spent the last of her cash on a cheap burner phone and made the call. Vanessa's voice was sharp, skeptical, but intrigued. They agreed to meet. The meeting took place in a noisy, crowded food court, the perfect place for an anonymous conversation. Vanessa Cruz was a whirlwind of focused energy, her eyes missing nothing. Gloria, flanked by a nervous Eric and a grimly determined Marcus, laid it all out. She started with her father, then the gala, the threats, and finally, the contents of the drive. Vanessa listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Gloria finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Let me see the drive," she said. Marcus slid his laptop across the table. For the next hour, Vanessa scrolled through the files, her initial skepticism melting into stunned disbelief, then into the cold, focused anger of a hunter who has found her prey. "This is Monolithic, she finally breathed. This isn't just a story. This is a criminal enterprise. With this evidence, properly verified, we can dismantle his entire empire. Can you publish it? Gloria asked, her heart pounding. Vanessa's eyes gleamed. Publish it. I'm going to make this my symphony. We release it all at once. A coordinated, multi-part exposé. Front page, above the fold, for a week straight. We start with the financial crimes to hook the business world. Then, the human cost the worker deaths. The harassment to galvanize the public. We end with the video from the gala. The personal, racist cruelty that ties it all together. The plan was audacious, terrifying, and brilliant. For the next week, they worked in the shadows. Vanessa and her team of researchers began the painstaking work of verification. Marcus helped them trace the money trail. Eric, at great personal risk, smuggled out corroborating documents from inside the Sterling Tower. Gloria gave a detailed, on-the-record statement, her voice steady as she recounted decades of pain and injustice. The day before the first article was set to run, Vanessa called an emergency meeting. They met in the back of a dusty, used bookstore. The journalist's face was pale, her usual energy replaced by a weary fury. "They know," she said, her voice tight. "Sterling's lawyers descended on my editor's office this morning. They have sources everywhere. They threatened to sue the paper into oblivion. Not just the paper, but the publisher, the editor, and me. Personally, they'll tie us up in litigation for the next 20 years. "So you'll fight them?" Marcus said. Vanessa shook her head, a look of profound defeat in her eyes. "My editor killed the story. He killed the entire series. The owners won't risk it. It's over. They're too powerful." The words hung in the air, a death sentence for their hopes. All that work, all that risk, for nothing. The system wasn't just rigged, it was invulnerable. Gloria felt the floor drop out from under her. She had been so close. They had been so close. As if on cue, her burner phone rang, an unknown number. She answered, a sense of dread closing around her throat. Gloria Hayes, a familiar, silky voice purred. It was Richard Sterling. "I hear you've been busy. A word of friendly advice. Some legacies are best left buried. Stop now, and I might be convinced to let you disappear quietly. Keep pushing, and I will erase you. I will strip you of your home, your reputation, and your freedom, just like my father did to yours. Check the news." He hung up, trembling. Gloria pulled up a news site on her phone. The headline hit her like a physical blow. Disgruntled ex-janitor investigated for corporate espionage and extortion against Sterling Dynamics. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination, quoting anonymous sources who described her as unstable and vindictive, a fired employee seeking revenge. It mentioned her history of frivolous complaints and hinted at a criminal investigation. They weren't just killing the story. They were creating a new one, with her as the villain. At that exact moment, the bookstore's front bell chimed. Two large men in dark suits entered, their eyes scanning the aisles. "They found us," Eric whispered, his face ashen. "Back exit, now," Vanessa commanded. They scrambled out into a grimy back alley. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "They're not just trying to silence us," Marcus said, his voice grim as he helped Gloria over a pile of trash bags. "They're coming to arrest her." They split up, disappearing into the labyrinth of the city. Gloria ran, her lungs burning, the sirens screaming behind her. She was no longer a whistleblower. She was a fugitive. They had taken her story, twisted it into a lie. And now they were coming to take her freedom. She had lost. The empire had struck back, and it had crushed her. Huddled in the back of a city bus, its windows grimy with street dirt, Gloria felt the cold, hard finality of defeat. Her name was being dragged through the mud on every news channel. Her face was plastered across websites next to words like extortion and unstable. Sterling had done exactly what he promised. He was erasing her. Her burner phone buzzed with a final, desperate text from Marcus before the battery died. They raided my apartment. Took everything. Eric's gone dark. It's over. Save yourself. She got off the bus in a neighborhood she didn't recognize, a place of shuttered storefronts and weary faces. She had nothing. No home to return to. No allies left, and a reputation so thoroughly destroyed that no one would ever believe her. The USB drive, with its universe of truth, felt useless in her pocket. It was her word against a billionaire's, and his story was already winning. She found a small, dimly lit church, its doors open to the bruised evening. She sank into a back pew, the scent of old wood and candle wax a small comfort. She thought of her father, of the strength he'd had before the Sterlings broke him. Had he felt this same crushing weight, this same suffocating certainty that the world was not built for men like him? As she sat there, a figure slid into the pew beside her. She tensed, ready to run, but a familiar, terrified voice whispered her name. Gloria. It was Eric. His suit was rumpled, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. "They came to my apartment," he said, his voice shaking. "They questioned me for hours, threatened to ruin me, to make sure I'd never work in this city again. I told them I didn't know anything." "You should have stayed away," Gloria said, her voice hollow. "There's nothing left to fight for." "That's not true," he whispered, his hands trembling as he held out his personal cell phone. "They took my laptop, my drives, but they didn't think to check this. When I first copied the drive you have, I was so scared. I made another backup. Just one file. The one I thought was the most important." He navigated to a hidden folder on his phone, and there it was. The video from the gala. Crystal clear. Undeniable. "I was a coward," Eric said, tears welling in his eyes. "I was so scared of losing my future that I almost let them bury the truth. But seeing what they did to you, to Marcus, my future isn't worth anything in a world where men like Sterling win. This is all I have left. But it's yours. If you still want to fight." Gloria stared at the phone screen, at the image of her own public crucifixion. For days, she had been fighting Sterling on his terms with financial data, legal documents, and media strategies. And she had lost. He was a master of that game. But this was different. This wasn't about numbers on a spreadsheet. This was about raw, human cruelty. This was a language everyone understood. A new resolve, hard and sharp, cut through her despair. They had taken her reputation. They had branded her a liar and a criminal. They thought they had left her with nothing. But they had left her with the one thing they couldn't spin. The one thing they couldn't bury in legal jargon. They had left her with their own ugliness, captured on video. "They control the news," she said, her voice no longer hollow, but filled with a cold, clear purpose. "They control the courts, but they don't control everything." She took the phone from Eric. "Thank you," she said. And for the first time in days, she met his eyes with a real smile. "You're no coward. Eric, you're the bravest person I know." She stood up and walked out of the church, back into the city that had turned against her. She no longer needed a newspaper or a television station. In her hand, she held a weapon of pure, viral truth. Sterling had built his empire in the towers of finance and media. She was about to burn it down from the streets. From the borrowed corner of a student's dorm room, a space secured by a third cousin of a friend from church, Gloria launched her final, desperate assault. With Marcus's old lessons on digital security echoing in her mind, she created a dozen anonymous social media accounts. She wrote a simple, powerful caption. My name is Gloria Hayes. For 10 years, I was a janitor at Sterling Dynamics. This is what my CEO, Richard Sterling, did to me when he thought no one was watching. Justice for Gloria, Justice corporate racism. She attached the video file. She took a deep breath. And she hit post. The first hour was agonizingly quiet. A few views, a handful of confused comments. Then, it began. A share from a small, local activist group. A retweet from a mid-level celebrity known for social commentary. The numbers started to climb, from hundreds to thousands. The video was brutal, undeniable. Unlike financial documents, it required no explanation. You saw Sterling's smug face. You heard his cruel command. You felt the suffocating silence of the room. And you saw Gloria's quiet, powerful dignity as she refused to break. By the third hour, it was trending. The hashtags were exploding. People weren't just sharing the video. They were sharing their own stories. The barista fired for being sick. The warehouse worker denied overtime. The administrative assistant enduring daily harassment. A torrent of suppressed rage and quiet indignities found its voice, with Gloria's story as its catalyst. By evening, the digital firestorm had become a physical one. A small group of protesters appeared outside the Sterling Dynamics Tower, their signs hastily drawn on cardboard. An hour later, the group had swelled to 100. By nightfall, the entire block was a sea of angry, chanting people, news vans, which had hours earlier been broadcasting Sterling's version of the story, now scrambled to cover the burgeoning protest. Inside the dorm room, Gloria, Eric, and a newly resurfaced Marcus watched the chaos unfold on a cracked laptop screen. They can't stop it, Eric said, his voice filled with awe as he scrolled through a global trend map. It's the #1 topic in 12 countries. Sterling's PR team is trying to get the video taken down, claiming copyright infringement, Marcus reported, monitoring corporate channels. But it's like trying to put water back in a bucket. For every one they remove, 100 new copies pop up. Gloria's phone, a new burner, began to ring. It was Vanessa Cruz. "You magnificent, crazy woman," the journalist said, her voice alive with excitement. "My editor just called me, begging me to come back to the office. The owners are panicking. The public tide has turned so fast and so hard. They have no choice. They want the whole story. Everything you have. No restrictions." The next morning, Richard Sterling, his face a mask of fury, called an emergency press conference. He stood at a podium in the grand lobby of his tower. The sounds of the massive protest outside a muffled but persistent roar. "The video is a deepfake, a malicious fabrication," he declared, his voice strained. But the questions from the press, so friendly just a day before, were now sharp and hostile. "Mr. Sterling, multiple guests from the gala have confirmed the video's authenticity. Care to comment?" "Sir, our sources say the SEC is opening an investigation based on financial documents leaked online in connection with this case. Is that true?" "Mr. Sterling, can you respond to the dozens of former employees now coming forward with their own allegations of abuse and harassment?" He began to unravel on live television. He sweated. He stammered. He lashed out, calling the reporters vultures and the protesters a rent-a-mob. His carefully constructed image of a powerful, untouchable titan of industry was cracking, shattering, right before the world's eyes. His stock price was in freefall. Board members were resigning. The fortress was crumbling from within. The climax came at the annual shareholder meeting 3 days later, held in a fortified conference room as protesters chanted outside. It was Sterling's last stand, his final attempt to calm his investors and save his throne. He didn't know that Eric had used his intern credentials to plant a small device in the room's AV system. He didn't know that Marcus, from their makeshift command center, was about to hijack the entire presentation. As Sterling began his speech about malicious attacks and disinformation, the massive screen behind him flickered. The corporate logo vanished, replaced by the gala video, playing on a loop for the entire room of horrified investors to see. "Turn it off," Sterling screamed, but Marcus had locked the system. Then came the other evidence. The spreadsheet detailing the theft from the pension fund, the internal memos about the factory deaths, the audio recordings of Sterling bribing a city official. It played out in a horrifying, undeniable symphony of corruption. And as the shareholders began to flee, and the board members stared in stony silence, a new piece of evidence appeared on the screen, one that only Gloria, watching from the dorm room, truly understood. It was an old, scanned document, part of her father's personal files she had given to Marcus. A draft of a letter from her father to the district attorney, dated a week before his death, outlining his intent to expose Arthur Sterling's fraud. Beside it, another document. Marcus had uncovered a withdrawal from a Sterling shell company, a 5-figure payment to a private contractor with a history of making problems disappear. It wasn't just corporate raiding, it was likely murder. At that moment, the doors to the conference room burst open. FBI agents poured in. "Richard Sterling," the lead agent announced, his voice booming through the shocked silence. "You are under arrest." As they snapped handcuffs on his wrists, Sterling's wild, hate-filled eyes scanned the room, looking for a source, for someone to blame. And through the lens of a news camera, broadcasting live to the world, his gaze seemed to land on Gloria. She met it through the screen, her expression calm, her victory complete. He had tried to make her crawl. Instead, she had brought his entire world to its knees. 1 year later, the autumn wind whipped across a barren lot in the South Bronx, a patch of land where a Sterling Dynamics chemical plant once stood. The factory, a notorious polluter, had been torn down as part of the company's court-ordered dissolution. The air, for the first time in decades, smelled clean. Gloria Hayes stood on a small, makeshift stage, a construction helmet tucked under her arm. The crowd before her was not filled with billionaires and socialites, but with factory workers, community organizers, single mothers, and former Sterling employees. Marcus stood in the front row, now a sought-after consultant for corporate fraud investigations. Beside him, Eric, who had just been accepted into law school on a full scholarship, beamed with pride. After Sterling's arrest, the floodgates had opened. Class action lawsuits, federal investigations, and public outrage had dismantled the corrupt empire, piece by piece. Gloria, whose testimony had been central to it all, had received a significant settlement from the whistleblower portion of the federal case. She could have retired. She could have disappeared into a quiet, comfortable life. Instead, she had created the Hayes Foundation for Worker Justice. "They told us we were powerless," Gloria said into the microphone, her voice carrying over the wind. "They told us we were invisible. They wanted us to believe that our dignity was something they could grant or take away." She gestured to the empty lot around them. This land was once a place of poison, a place where profits were valued more than people. Today, we break ground on something new. Behind her, A large banner depicted an architect's rendering of a modern, welcoming building, the Hayes Center for Legal Aid and Community Empowerment. "We are building a place where no worker will ever have to be afraid to speak up," she continued, her voice ringing with passion. "A place with free legal counsel, job training, and support for those who stand up to corporate abuse. We are turning a place of exploitation into a place of empowerment. We are taking the ruins of their greed and building a monument to our resilience." The crowd erupted in cheers. Gloria stepped down from the stage and picked up a ceremonial silver shovel. Alongside a local councilwoman and a union leader, she plunged it into the earth. The soil was dark and rich, ready for a new beginning. As cameras flashed and people celebrated, Gloria looked out at the faces in the crowd, faces of every color, age, and background, united by a shared belief in justice. She saw Mrs. Rodriguez from her old neighborhood, whose grandson would now have access to the center's health advocates. She saw some of her former co-workers from the cleaning crew, now proud members of a newly formed union. Her victory was not just in Sterling's downfall, but in this, in the community that had risen up, in the hope that was being planted right here, in this wounded but healing soil. She was no longer a ghost in their machine. She was an architect of a better world. She had faced the monster, and not only had she won, she had used the monster's own ill-gotten wealth to ensure that no one would ever have to fight it alone again. The cold rage that had sustained her for so long was gone, replaced by a deep, quiet warmth. It was the feeling of justice, not as an end, but as a beginning.